Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for being part of the virtual event, which is organized by Women Who Test Bangalore and Trigen. So I'm Shruti, the chapter leader for Women Who Test, and will be the host for the day. So currently, I'm working as a senior test engineer in Trigen. So talking about Trigen, Trigen is a pioneer in software development and it's a leading enabler of digital transformation. So it also provides a solution for enhancing the customer experience, adopting a new business solutions, building a modern workspace, and driving the profitable growth. Coming to our topic for the day, we are centered around the topic for today is centered around reimagining the future skills, how to reframe our careers, and in the current situation around the world, which is impacted by the pandemic. So we observe that we are slowed down in our process, and it has put so many challenges in front of us which we never imagined that that will even exist. So we don't know what would be there for us in next 5 to 10 years. In the past, when any organization was developing any product, the expectation was the whole team should be working at a single location. But now the situation has been changed, where we are working remotely. So for us, the ability to adapt ourselves is very much important. Opportunities are very redundant now, so we'll have to keep ourselves optimistic and use the time to transform ourselves. So we can see that the market is changing drastically. We see that from past few months, whatever was there, it's not now. So changes is it's continuous to do. So what we sensibly thought was we invite someone who could help us to navigate through during these times. So we are delightful to have Anuranjita Kumar, who is a chairperson of Women in Technology and an MD of Indus Cap Ventures, who is a distinguished HR leader and an author. So with her years of experience, she's here to share us and advise us on how to reimagine future skills and how can we reframe our careers. So Anu, we welcome, it's an honor to have you here. So before I hand it over to Anu, there are a few things which I would let you guys know about the seminar. As an attendee, you will be mute for the complete session, and the session is for 40 minutes, where additional 10 minutes will be for the Q&A. And whenever you have any questions, towards your right panel, you have a questions guide where you can just type your questions and send it over to us. So all your questions will be picked up at the end, but you can type your questions at whenever the time you want. So thank you all for your time. So over to you, Anu. We welcome you once again.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me properly.
Yes, Anu, you are audible.
Thank you so much. And thank you to you and to Trigen for having me. I think, one of the reasons why I was really looking forward to this session is it feels a bit like homecoming from somebody who's working for the platform of Women in Technology in India. And I think every time I come for these sessions, given that I'm not a techie, very selfishly, I learn a lot. So this is less not just about me sharing what I think, but a lot of feedback from all of you, which adds to my learning, and it's been a life lesson that continuous learning is what I should stay with. So I thought before talking about just simply future skills, or probably as I dwell on future skills, what would be helpful is future perspectives. And as I was thinking about what to share with you in this session to make this real for you, I'm going to deviate a little bit and go into when I was in my 20s or 30s. What would I do differently, having worked now for over 26 years? And some of the life lessons that I have learned, which has kept me going through, skill development, through multiple crises that I have had to manage in my career, be it the dot-com bust, be it the global financial crisis, and so forth, so on. So in some ways, as we're going through Corona, some of those learnings of mine had keeping me afloat even now. And that has translated us, in our efforts of launching Women in Tech just before COVID and keeping it going during COVID. And I'm glad to say that we've got just so much traction that we are right now overwhelmed with that. So, what has kept us in terms of thoughts and perspectives? And then we'll come to skills. So, I think, I start with the lesson that life doesn't always present you with opportunities, you create them. You create them basis the circumstances that you're in. You create them basis your own preferences and choices. You create them basis your own ambitions. So, over the 26 years, there were three big lessons on these opportunities which stood out for me. The first one is, I think, one of the biggest challenges actually cultivating a beginner's mindset. Okay. Keeping yourself open minded, whether you are women who test, whether you are women who code, but keeping yourself fully, open minded, and making sure you're still open to the world and continue to see new things like a fresher would in a college. Okay. You can actually get jaded when you're working or you're testing or you're coding. You can stop seeing things that you are that are new, and you can start fearing failure. And that's another big lesson I've had. Don't fear failure, because it's the biggest lesson that you actually learn what to do and what not to do. So those are the things that a fresher entrepreneur or somebody who's working in technology, which is finally going to define the world in the time to come, needs to do. An open mind and ability to see the world with different eyes. So that was my first learning. Second, when I talk to my younger self, I always tell myself to be confident, first and foremost, to believe in myself before anyone else, because it's a bit like, if you don't know how to take a bet on yourself, who else will? So I think the self belief is very important, because it gives you this unwavering faith in what you're doing. So, a lot of times when I'm talking to women in different communities, and we have communities of women coders, women in fintech, women in AI, and I'm talking to women who test, when you're going through this process of testing, what is it that you're testing? Not just the specs or the use cases or the UATs, you're also testing a vision, a dream that somebody's trying to make through that, tech tool which might be being developed. So I think it's important to honor that belief, and I think it's ultimately this belief that enables us to enable others. So it's all about what your goals are, what you're passionate about, and that leads to a really magical position to be. And the last learning, which I think is extremely relevant at this point of time, is feeling a little uncomfortable with your skills is an important thing. It's a sign of learning, continuous learning. And we talked about learning, and one of the reasons of me being in this session. And learning is what the tech environment thrives on, right? You're continuously developing yourself, learning new languages, learning new skills, learning new codes. So continuous learning is extremely important. So seek out an environment where you're supported for that learning. But I think you have to get used to getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, getting familiar with the unknown, if there is anything like that, and feeling at peace, not knowing the answer and not always searching for that answer. So these were three of my life lessons. And I think, every stage of your life demands a different you. So, I'm not the same person who started my career 26 years back. I'm not even the same person who started a new venture about 6 months back. I think every month, every day, every week, you're kind of learning something, and hence you're developing. And, when you start something new, the scariest moment is just before you start. So I will go back to a sports analogy. Those of you who swim, who cycle, the first time you touched on that, or you sat on that cycle and you didn't know how to balance, was really scary. But once you were on it, it it flew. If you're doing a deep dive into a pool, the moment you're standing just outside the water is really scary. When you jump into the water, you're in the water, so you have to swim or you sink. So I think the scariest moment has to be overcome with that self belief. And whatever path you take, the path is made by walking. So, coming back to now, those were my perspectives. But coming back to skills and what would be needed, I think the important bit to think about is that during COVID and post COVID, or rather, yeah, post COVID, where are we going with this? And I wish there was a simple answer, and actually, nobody really knows the answer. But what is being projected is it's going to be a world where the boundaries will blur between humans and tech. I think that's been coming for a very long time, and you might have read articles about it and you might have heard things about it. But the boundaries are going to blur even more because whether people are working remotely, they're looking for new solutions, the dependency on technology is exponentially higher because of a contactless world. Now, human beings are social beings, right? And not being in touch, not being in contact, in some ways will play up for the well being of the human race. So, one of the things that is being talked a lot about is how do you coexist with machines, with humanoids, with robots, and what does this mean for social interactions for us? And how do we align our own thinking and the skills to coexist? So, let me give you an example. Last year, I was in a convention in Geneva where it was a convention about new technologies, about robots and humanoids. And as I entered the auditorium, or before the auditorium, you have the registration desk. So they literally had a small humanoid or a bot sitting there who simply asked me, "What's your name?" And I said, "Anuranjita Kumar." And this humanoid literally popped out a card for me to enter the auditorium. So my feeling at that point of time was a fear, because I felt like I was in a sci-fi movie and this bot can attack me. I don't know why I had this feeling. I was curious, but I was also fearful. So I went inside the auditorium, and what happened was that because this company was showcasing their bots and humanoid skills, um, after every three chairs, there was a bot or a humanoid prototype, which was kind of placed for us to experience what the experience would look like. And then on the stage, there was a panel discussion where there was a bot and there were three humans. And as I sat there next to the bot, and this was a physical bot, obviously there was a voiceover which came and said, "Hi, Anu," because obviously the information's traveled with seat I'm sitting on. My name is Tom. Okay, so Tom had a gender, Tom. And I said, "Okay, well, hi, Tom." And he said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing fine." And then the panel discussion started and the questions started. And as the moderator asked the question, antennas of the bots would go up because they would ask questions and they would answer questions too. And so it was a really surreal experience. And then the funny bit is that in between, there was an intermission and I was going out to get a coffee. So, like, out of sheer politeness, I turned around to Tom and said, "Tom, I'm just going out. Can I get you something?" And, he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to get a coffee." He said, "Oh, no, liquid are not my body types." So they had infused Tom with some humor as well. Obviously, there were some engineers in the background who were controlling all this. Now, my limited point of stating this or sharing this incident with you is this is the world which we or my children are going to inherit, which a lot of you are going to be in. And the skill of coexisting, not simply coding or testing, but coexisting is real. And I don't know how many of you watch Netflix, but I'm a Netflix junkie and I watch, episodes of Black Mirror. So I don't know whoever watches Black Mirror, but if you don't, highly recommend it. So there are two episodes, two different serials I was watching. One is Black Mirror and the other one is Darknet. If you watch them, Darknet is reality and Black Mirror is fiction. But I swear to you, if you watch them, there is very little difference between fiction and reality there, right? So if you were to extrapolate this back to your technical skills and to your softer skills, technically, you're going to need state of art visualization even before you can code or test anything. And technically, you should be ready to fulfill that vision, which a lot of future leaders are going to have. Okay, so I think technically, I don't know what the new languages would be and what the new platforms would be and what the new database would be, but technology will become, as it is today, even a more integral tool to deliver those dreams and mission which take the human race to a completely different level. So I think technically the platforms are going to evolve. From a softer point of view, the coexistence would be extremely critical. And we're seeing that every day. I mean, let me give you a small example. It's like today, like this webinar, we're doing it through a technical platform, right? In the past, a lot of people prefer face-to-face interactions. It's not possible today because of what we're going through, and maybe this will be the new normal. Now this is going to redefine how people interact, deal with each other, and it will take toll on their well-being, mental well-being, because as I said, human race is a social race. So as technology leaders of the future, how are you going to solve for it? For example, can I feel the touch through the screen? Can I smell through the screen? Can I really exercise my five senses apart from my voice and my visual senses? That's the human experience which we will need to build. How that's going to happen, I don't know. But I can tell you if we will go in there, because at least when I was a child and when somebody told me that you can talk to somebody on a video, it was the most absurd, unreal thing that we heard as 5 year olds. It was the dream. And today it's normal, right, for us to talk on a video call. So similarly, this will happen. So all your five senses will need to be exploited, and how that's going to happen will take a human tech combination. And I think this human tech combination is coming um, up many times. It's coming up in universities. If you look at what the government has done recently, where they said students can study any subjects, whether it's liberal arts or science. You look at all the interdisciplinary universities which are coming up, like Plaksha, Mahindra has launched something, Reliance is launching something. Why are we going for disciplines which are interdisciplinary? Because it's all about the human touch. So that to me stands out as the first and foremost. I don't know whether that's a skill, but it's certainly a mindset that you will have to operate with. And I expect each one of you to be leaders in the future who will drive this agenda forward. So that's the first one. Second one, I would say data skills or analytical skills. I think they are not going out of fashion. And as life gets more complex and more of these challenges are thrown at us, data scientists are very, very, I would say, treasured commodities, because there just isn't enough talent in the market today. So I think the way you analyze things, and analyze always may not be related to data, but how you analyze situations to find solutions. How do you tie that up with the big data? How do you decipher the big data, and how do you really predict the future? The reason why I'm saying power of data, because data has the power to predict the future, and we have probably till today just scratched the surface. So data skills and analytical skills will be extremely critical in times to come, and that's something which, as industry, we would be looking for talent. I mean, I can tell you it's in dearth. There are multiple courses which are run around this by a lot of edtechs, but we are yet finding a dearth of people who can be data scientists. And I'm not sure where the gap is. Is it because of preferences? Is it because it's very tough? But the demand is far outstripping the supply that we have in the market. So analytical data skills will become even much more valuable than they are today, and something that I would strongly say watch out for, apart from the whole human tech skills that we've already spoken about. Third one will be entrepreneurial and strategic mindsets. So, as I said, tech data finally caters to what the strategy is going to be. And strategy requires a very big picture view of situations. So, those of you who may ever think about and saying, look, I want to really expand my wings, start my own venture, you will have to have a bird's eye view of the entire universe. Very often, as investors, I have a lot of people come and talk to me about their dreams. And the things that we look for is how much diligence have you done? How much do you really understand the landscape? Is it a new idea, or is it an idea which you're trying to upgrade on? How much do you really understand? So having that big picture view of a situation will be important, whether you do a job or you start on your own, because when you see a big picture view, you're able to kind of connect the dots and make sense of it. If you just attack one piece, then likelihood is you're missing the entire problem. So the problem statements come from the big picture view. And once you have the problem statement right, you know what is the solution. And then you can have best of technology, best of data, all of that supporting you. So when we're looking for leaders at mid to senior level, one of the key criteria that we look for is what is their strategic view of a situation? How much do they, how much do we call it the ZIZO factor? Okay, we call it zoom in, zoom out. So how much can you zoom into a situation, which means you can get micro and then zoom out? Because at mid to senior level, you don't stay at micromanagement level. You should be able to see the big picture, put the chess pieces together, and be able to execute. So try any situation, any problem, any testing, anything you're doing, always know what is the purpose. When I talk to a community of women who test, why do you test? Right? If you simply test for the sake of testing, I mean, very candidly, it can get boring after a point of time. But if you test because you know that this piece of testing is actually going to serve this purpose, the whole journey becomes so much richer because you're part of a bigger universe, right? So there's this small story which comes to my mind that, I read it somewhere that somebody who was walking down the street, saw two people cleaning. He comes across somebody who's cleaning the road, and he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm cleaning the road." Okay, and then he walks slightly ahead, and he finds another person who's cleaning the road, and he said, "What do you think you're doing?" And he said, "Well, I am trying to reduce and eliminate coronavirus." So he was really quizzical and he said, "How are you doing it?" He said, "Because if I clean this properly, then I will be able to reduce the virus because I can actually eliminate it through disinfectant and all that." Both the people are doing the same job, right? But look at the thought of one person, and these are two cleaners. One feels that he's serving the universe by cleaning because he will drive the virus out, where the other just thinks he's cleaning, right? Now, I don't have to say who will go further and who would this person be inclined to talk to more. So this is just an example of saying how the big picture view is extremely critical, and always try and understand that whatever you're doing will be connected to that big picture view. The fourth thing I would talk about is creativity. Challenge the status quo, think differently, don't take a no for an answer, ask several times, why do we do it, right? So there is this very famous talk of Simon Sinek, who's a very well-known TED speaker as well, who talks about a golden circle, though that's a more marketing spiel. But what I like about that talk is that when Apple started their whole branding exercise, and some of you might have seen it, they went through why, what, how, right? Not saying, okay, we sell phones or we sell this. And they started with, why do we do what we do? And the answer was, we like to challenge status quo, and we're doing it by being creative. And by the way, we sell phones. Would you like to buy one? Right? So having that why is important to being channel your creativity juices rightly, thinking differently. Because the problems or the headwinds that you will face today and tomorrow will never be solved by the solutions of yesterday, because we didn't have coronavirus yesterday. So there is no point in saying, acha, we used to do it like this, 1 year back, because even if you did that 6 months back, it's not relevant today. So the ability to ideate, to create, to innovate is paramount, right? And that's going to be a key skill of the future. And all it takes to start with is just a willingness to do it, is the willingness to ask why we do what we do. What is the reason behind it? When you start challenging the status quo, patterns start to emerge about what is happening, and you will start to see gaps. And then you can apply all kind of theories behind, whether it's Daniel Kahneman or other things that you might have run. And by the way, those of you who've not read Daniel Kahneman, please do. Thinking Fast and Slow, I love that book. That innovation and creativity will be extremely critical for a different kind of solutioning and advising clients, advising industry, advising. And this could mean even in your personal life, what you do today is different. It puts you in the right place to create new products, tapping into new consumer sets. And sometimes, when we are creating products, even a consumer don't know that they need it. So I'll give you a small example. Women in Technology Forum, and that will be more relevant to the audience today. So when we launched this, I kind of quit my career after 26 years, and then I decided to join a venture capital, and I decided to spend some time on Women in Technology India platform, which is my own entrepreneurial venture. As things turned out, I spend now 90% of my time on that because it's become so big. But when I started it, and I talked to the industry, everybody said, yeah, we have training programs, we have hiring, we have this, we have that. And then we went out and created some new things after a lot of research. So we used a lot of data. We did 20 focus groups. We decided to look at hard programs, soft programs, and we decided to launch some soft programs. So if you go to our WIT handle, you will see a campaign going on right now. Yes, I can, because all the programs are based on my book called Can I Have It All? And we are going in this campaign, Yes, I Can, because we are addressing confidence. Now, what I realized was that everybody believed that they had everything that they need. Till we did a lot of research, we gathered data, and we realized that actually it wasn't the case. And then when we launched it, it just kind of has bloomed, and we've had a lot of traction. So I think taking that leap of faith comes from a will of challenging status quo and being able to create something new. Creativity comes from having different perspectives and thoughts. It needs to be backed up with data. So as you can see, all the three or four things that I'm speaking about in some way are also connected. And creativity can win your personal life. Innovation is largely related at workplace. So creativity will lead to some innovations which can create completely different design and products of the future. One of the things I realized is design thinking, since we're talking about creativity and innovation, and I've had the privilege of talking to a lot of CEOs in this country and a lot of boards. So there were a couple of discussions I had recently with an auto company who called me in and saying, why is diversity so important? So I don't usually talk about diversity. I talk about innovation, and I try and sell the pitch why diversity brings innovation. So I said, look, since you're an auto company, let me share, I'm a mother of two children. And when I was pregnant, one of the things I used to get really annoyed with my car was tying my seat belt over, a big belly. And it's really uncomfortable when you're 8 months, 9 months pregnant and you have to tie a safety seat belt. It's really uncomfortable. So invariably, what I used to do is I used to tie it from the back. And so by default, the safety feature is gone for a toss. So I asked them, I said, have you ever asked a woman the way a seatbelt needs to be designed? And there was a deadpan silence because nobody's ever thought about it, because there are no women in the design team, and there is certainly not a pregnant woman whose inputs have been taken. And I said, how about having a car which can give us this feature? Think about what it will do. And this was just about 4 weeks back. So when I talk about creativity, I'm thinking out of the box, but I'm solving a consumer need. Okay. Let me give you another example, which is slightly disconnected to testing and coding and technology. But I was talking to a management team of a very big insurance company in this country. And the CEO called me and said, look, it's really tough because my management team is not convinced why we should have diversity, and diversity is really linked to innovation. So when I went in, obviously I asked them about their revenues, their commercials, and what was going on. And I asked them, okay, so tell us a little bit about your products, who was your consumer set? So they said earning member of the family because they pay the premium. So I said, okay, and who are the earning members of the family? Obviously, largely men. So I said, well, do you have any products which you think we can use for the family or for the women? And they said, but most women yet prefer their husbands pay the premium. So they were looking at me like, really not interested in this innovation debate. Excuse me. So I suddenly turned around and I said, I have a few women who come and talk to me about bad relationships, who come and talk to me about bad marriages, and the only reason they stick around with their husband or in a bad relationship is because of money, because they can't afford to get into a situation where they can't afford to bring up their children, they can't afford their lifestyle. So have you ever thought about a prenuptial product for a woman where, for today you give 1 crore life policy for 10,000 premium because you can gauge the probability? How about 1 crore for 2 lakh premium? And I'll tell you what, if a woman's in a bad relationship, she'll find the premium. And I can't tell you, there was suddenly some captive interest. And they started telling me, but Anu, usme fraud ho jayega, these people will not stick together. I said, look, we'll find a way to do it. If you want to do it, we can stagger the payments over 3 years. There are multiple ways to manage it. So the reason I'm bringing this back to creativity at workplace is it's just a simple changing of lens and looking at situations differently. Whether you're women in technology, whether you're women who test, whether you're women in insurance, or whether you're men, this applies to both men and women. And I think creativity is again just simply changing a lens and not being tunnel visioned and looking at what you've been used to seeing. So this goes back to my point about being comfortable with the uncomfortable. When you have to challenge the status quo and think differently, then you will have to get out of your comfort zone. And that's not always very comforting because you're so used to it. It's so much easier. We come to our office, we are like zombies. We look at our outlook, how many meetings, how many times do we say, oh, well, let me just challenge this, let me look at it differently, and do not blame time on it. A lot of time people tell me, oh, I'm so busy, I just don't have time to do it. No, that's probably just an excuse. That's an excuse about why I don't want to do it. So creativity is a big one. And then the fifth one, and then I will pause because I'm already half an hour into this chat and I want to give 10, 15 minutes for any Q&A. The fifth one I would say is going to be about resilience, right? So when you are starting out on, to look at things differently, there will be failures. There will be things which will never work out. And that can be quite demotivating. So how do you overcome those failures? Nowadays in the market, people are saying the skill to acquire is anti-fragility. I mean, it's a bit of a jargon, but anti-fragility is now, and anti-fragility is not equal to resilience. And the difference is resilience is about being tough and being able to learn from your failures and being able to move on. Anti-fragility is basically developing a muscle that just doesn't tank. So anti-fragility is actually a stronger term to use. So being resilient and anti-fragile is important because we are going into this very unknown, unspoken future, which is exciting for people who want to leverage this opportunity for creativity. But maybe you will try 10 times and only 2 times you will succeed. And for those 8 times, you will need to be resilient and you will need to be looking at the positive side of the situation and saying glass is half full, not half empty. It didn't work out, but here are my learnings about what to do better next time. So resilience will be a key mindset and a skill to have in the future, or a competency if you want to say it, and that'll be critical. And I think I just want to take a couple of minutes to weave this with what the tech world would demand. So we have about 100 clients on board on the WIT platform, and when I talk to some of the biggest companies in the world or in this country, the kind of skill set they are looking for, and I'm going to keep the tech skill set aside because I'm sure all of you are fabulous on that. And anything which is technical, so long as you have an average aptitude, can be acquired. And whether it's your Angular or your Pythons or Java, everything can be acquired so long as you're willing to work hard for it. So all those, I'm making an assumption that technically all of you are savvy, because the companies beyond a point look at the softer skills much more than just the tech skills. They look at project management, which is becoming more and more important because the workforce is going to be very amoebic. So, and this goes back to my big picture view. So, which is where your big picture skills come in. So, when we get the job specs, one of the things they look at is how do you project manage, right? The second thing is advisory, how you're able to advise a client. Not just, and this again leads into the bit I talked about creativity, being able to understand the big picture, being able to look at data, being able to create. A client will value you so much more and even respect you if you put in that effort to understand and advise them. And a good advisory happens on the back of the 5 things that I've spoken about. And the third thing that they tend to value a lot will be about challenging them a lot more. Challenging them in terms of saying, look, we kind of, this is not right. this can be done differently. Many a times what happens, the clients feel is just because they're paying the bill, people tend to go along. And sometimes clients are not always confident. They're very happy to get feedback. So challenging somebody, going back to my point about self-confidence, you need to be very confident about what you're saying. And that again will come from a lot of research. And when I sit with a CXO or a management team and I challenge them, it comes from the fact that I've done a lot of research before I go to them. So let me give you a live example. We're doing some work with Google. Okay, everybody knows Google, it's a big company. So I got called in to deliver a program. So last night I spent 3 hours just doing a whole Google research on Google on that particular topic. And believe you me, I figured out so many opportunities just for Google, right? I've gone through 3 research reports. I've gone through all the 5 things that have happened in the last few months for them. And now, today, when I talk to their CEO, I feel much more confident that I can actually tell him that you don't need this, you need this. And here is what I've read. And maybe that, anything which is not public information, I will obviously not have access, but happy to be guided. But when you present that to a CEO, he feels you're taking ownership, right? You've taken the effort to go out of your boundary and go into what is going to happen in his company. You've automatically got 50% of his or her attention. And the rest 50% is obviously the product that we pitch for. So I think the whole challenge bit requires a huge amount of engagement, and that is extremely critical when you are working, whether in a company, you could be working with the BU head, or whether you're working in your own place where you are working with a client. So, and the last one, which is the fifth one, because I'm giving you 5 skills and 5 perspectives. The clients tend to, or companies or leaders, what they tend to value in their workforce is somebody who is, this goes back to the point of reinventing. I've had a lot of people who are working with me, and even as like when I look at WIT as a venture or a startup, every week is a month for us and every month is a year for us. So what we were doing 2 months back has to dramatically change. But I will always find 1 or 2 people who are stuck 2 months back and saying, Hamese, we were delivering in this way, so we should continue delivering. And as a head of the company, I would value if they were able to move with pace and agility. So agility is becoming a big mindset shift and change their way of thinking. There is immense talent, there is immense potential, but the inertia to change and being able to reinvent yourself is also huge, because reinventing takes effort at all ends. But these are things which I think leaders or workplaces tend to really value. What I'm finding lately is that, it isn't just about, as I've said earlier, it's just not about technical skills. It's about the 5 softer skills and 5 thoughts and mindsets shifts, which we need to make to keep ourselves growing, learning, and also making a success of whoever we want to be. And underlying all of this is a core purpose. And that's the last thing that I want to talk about and then pause. So, core purpose is important. And intellectually, we all get it because we get it, right? We think we know why we are doing what we're doing. You will be surprised that the number of coaching and mentorings we do, where we get stuck is, why are you here? Why are you doing women in testing? Why are you doing women in technology? Is it just because of a salary? Is it because of a larger purpose? So one of the things I always recommend, and this is not about junior, mid-level, or senior, it could also be at a student level. In this moment or in this time, what purpose are you fulfilling? Why are you here? Why are you in this webinar? And what is it that you're going to take? Because if you don't know where you're going, anything can take you there and you can lose your path. Your purpose keeps on your path. And when I said paths are made by walking, your purpose is the fuel behind that walk, which you will undertake to do your path. So I think, for me, that's been a great learning. And there is a very famous poem by Robert Frost, which a lot of you might have heard, which is The Road Less Traveled. And, where he talks about, and it's a beautiful poem, I don't have it handy, but do read it. It talks about, the road less travel makes all the difference to who you become. And for me in my career, every time I got comfortable, when I was with PNG, I jumped to Citibank. I did 3 different assignments in Citi across 3 different continents, never being there. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. There were tough moments as well. I got comfortable, I moved to RBS. I got comfortable, I moved to venture capital. And it is the searching of your purpose which keeps you moving. And I think sometimes in this searching is where you find your calling. So I'm going to pause here, Shruti, and we have about 20 minutes. I can go on and on, but I'm going to pause for a few minutes and take any questions or any comments or thoughts that people have.
Thank you, Anu. That was very informative and educative and motivative as well. Yeah, thank you for your session. Uh, so, attendees, if you have any questions, I think you can post it on the questions panel. Anu, I have a question. So, how do I, as an individual, develop my social skills? So, I mean, could you help me out on that?
Sure. So I think on social skills, it's a very good point, to be honest with you, and it's underlying a lot of relationship management that you need to do. Relationships are important. People are broadly introverted or extroverted. They are on that dimension, right? Some people are naturally better because they actually derive their energy from being social. And so they can jump into meetings, they can talk much more easily. Whereas the introverted people derive their energy from their inner self. So for them, it's a little uncomfortable going and reaching out to a bunch of people who are not known to them. Um, and I think what people are on different scale on this dimension of introversion extroversion. But one of the things I always say is that make a plan on social skills, right? What is important? So when I have a goal or a purpose, and let's say I'm making it very simple, I have a certain goal where I need to lead a project. Okay. The project requires me to interface with three other business departments and also lead a team of 4 people. To successfully do that, I need to build a good relationship. To build a good relationship, I need to have some commonality of thoughts and actions and talks with them. To have common thoughts and actions, I first need to understand what matters to them. Then I need to explain what matters to me. There will be things which we will find in common, there will be things which we will disagree immensely. The common things you build on, the disagreement things you don't bring up. But if you are, and as you develop social skills, what will happen is the common things will create a bind. And somewhere it will get more deep seated and they will become your friends. So let me tell you, I'm actually an introvert. So if you look at my MBTI profile, uh, it used to be till about 15 years back, I used to be INTJ. Okay. And people change. And then I did an MBTI about last year and I have become ENFP. I'm actually I'm in middle between I and E. So what happened was that for the time that I was working with investment banking, it was a huge amount of, being out there with everybody. So I did it as work, right? When you do it as work, it doesn't become a burden, because a lot of introverted people sometimes feel, and actually that's true for anybody, that when you strike a relationship, there are expectations. If I do this much for you, then there's a natural expectation, you start to feel a reciprocation. But when you do it as work, it's not being inauthentic, but you expect less, right? Because it's a part of your journey. It's like you're doing a project, you're doing it for this. You're not necessarily here to make a big relationship until and unless it becomes one, right? And it's at a professional level. I won't say superficial, but a professional level. So I think social skills is a habit, and you have to, if initially you are struggling with it, make a plan. For example, I will do 2 or 3 networking conversations in a month. Okay. I will have a mentor. On my work, I will deal with XYZ. The more you cultivate it, the more it will become a natural habit. And before you know, like me, you would have moved your dimension. Because as humans, we are not hard coded like robots. We will evolve. I mean, we are the open AI, right? So we will evolve. And so we can cultivate it, but it requires a bit of discipline, a bit of planning, and some of the things that I've spoken about. And that should hold you in good stead. You're on mute. Sorry, I can't hear.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Anu. Yeah. There's one more question, but it more looks like a technical one. And if you could give it a try, Anu. The question states that the attendee is a manual tester who is like, with an experience of more than 10 years. and the attendee is not interested either in coding or scripting. So they just want to know, like, what could be that technology which will, in future not demand any coding or scripting, but still remain in future, like next 5 years or something like that. Any such technology would be there if you could, suggest them. I mean, as I said, it's more of technical one is what they are telling.
I can't suggest technology, but I'm not into that space. But what I can certainly suggest is the demand that we are seeing. When I see the GPT-3 discussions which are going on in the market right now, anything you can develop in that space, you will be a very, very valuable commodity in the market. Right? So I don't know if there will be any technology which will not require any coding. Now, whether it will happen, you envisage a situation in the future, and let's build on this question, a vision where coding becomes as simple as speaking to Alexa. Let's think a little while, right? Why not? Why do we have to have these complicated languages which are very mechanical, right? Why can't we just speak to the software which actually codes for you? Because it can actually. You can code a software that codes for you. But that's the vision that I'm hearing from some leading technologists, which, by the way, for a lot of coders and testers, you know what it would mean, right? Because machines will write the code, they will test the code, and you are then final approver of the code. Now that is what is being envisaged in the market. So that's as far as I can answer that, Shruti. I will not be able to get into more technicalities than that.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for that. Yeah. Okay, there's one more question, which states that, we were talking about creativity. So, how do we drive the creativity at the workplace? Like, does it come from the manager, or as an employee, can we drive it, or they want little inputs on that?
I think there are two parts of it. I think every individual is a creative leader. The most complicated and fascinating machine is your own brain, right? So you own it, and you are the CEO of your own life, right? So I think creativity, you are the champion of your own creativity. What the manager can do is give you a conducive environment where your creative inputs are taken on board. So manager's role or the organization role is extremely critical to be able to thrive that creative ecosystem. Okay, but because if an employee gets a creative solution, challenges the status quo, but the manager is just like, no, 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 I don't want this, or that's not the way to deal with it, you're just going to create issues. So both management and employees are important. Management by themselves would be doing themselves a disservice if they're going to kill creativity. But creativity comes from each person, and a manager is also an employee or an individual, so they can get creative too. But I would see the leadership of a company creating that environment, the culture where people are able to bring forward. I mean, going back to the Google example, right? Why did Google do well? Because it's a culture where everybody's voice is heard. But having said that, now the challenge is, I don't know how many of you saw that grilling of the US Senate where they grilled the four CEOs of the big tech companies. So if you haven't seen it, see it, because US Senate called in Jeff Bezos, Sundar Pichai, Mark Zuckerberg, and Tim Cook, and there was this whole antitrust review which has taken place. So when I was listening to that debate, and one of the questions which was posed to Sundar Pichai was that why is Google so democratic, right? And it's bordering on democracy and activism. So that's a two different thing. So creativity, anything in excess where you think my creative inputs are the best, and if you don't listen to me, then I'm going to kind of walk out. That's also not the best healthy culture to have. So in Google, for example, the culture is been bordering on activism, where they've been so used to getting their personal views into office that it's creating now dissonance about what is the right value. But Google is a teenage company and they will sort themselves out. Question from the senator was that Google employees did not support Google working with US defense for a right cause, okay, for looking at what China is doing. So he said, is your activism more important than national security of this country? So, which is another extreme of creativity. So I think creativity is good so long as it's focused, and it's focused on a purpose which the organization defines, not loose creativity. You're again on mute, Shruti.
Yeah, so there's one more question. Since the remote working is the way to go, how can one identify the emotion behind only with the audio conversation? Sometimes the tone will not be interrupted correctly.
Yeah. So, that is a challenge. And we are seeing lately a lot of debates about emotional well being of people. Because, I'll be honest, maybe you can call me old school, but I do miss my canteen conversation. I do miss my water cooler conversation. I do miss my stealing my 15 minutes between meetings and gossiping with a colleague. I do miss that. And there was a joy of doing that in office. So let's not deny ourselves the social joys that an office provided, which is why I say that it will never be full on remote working, but the pendulum will settle somewhere in between. So I think as long as we are remote working, like this video calling really helps, for example. You can see I'm quite excited and I can talk a lot, and Shruti is much more measured and more thoughtful than I am. So we can see because facial expressions and non-verbals also give you cues about happiness or stress of a person. At an emotional level, we can sense the facial expressions of people. So a lot of people are not comfortable switching on their videos on Zoom, I'm realizing lately. I
Yeah.
almost in my team have to say, please switch on the video. And it's almost like I'm in my you really want to say I haven't really brushed, I haven't washed my face. But the point is, I do want to see you because I want to see how you're feeling. I don't want to stress you, but it's an important component of connectivity for us. So to the extent you can do video calls, do it. It's important. I'm not going to push people to come on the video, but that's how you provide connectivity. And the other thing is sometimes from the tone you can make out, it's a harder one to read, because tones can be sabotaged much more easily. So what I tend to do is when I'm just on an audio call is just ask a simple question. How are you feeling today? Right?
Hmm.
Is there something bothering you? Right? Is there anything that I can do to help? Just sometimes asking an open-ended question helps. When I'm not able to really see you or just hear you and I'm not really sure, but I care. And just asking the question is an expression of care. So I would say do all these three. Ask people how they feel, even if it's a colleague or a friend, or I haven't heard you, I haven't seen you, you haven't been on a video for a while, it's all okay. Can I do anything to help? People tend to respond to those questions and try and pay more attention. If people don't speak and they're very quiet in a meeting, it would worry me. It really does worry me because that means they are disengaged. And if they are not really focused, because if they're not really focused, then they will not answer the question rightly. So to me, those are two signals where the person is not fully there. And then I would deep dive and saying, okay, where are you? But certainly video calls are very helpful because people tend to give a lot from their faces and eyes than they would do from their voice.
Yeah, exactly, Anu. Yeah, thank you for that. There's one more question, which states that, which suits better in our careers, a paid executive or online courses from the reputed institutions or a free courses online?
It's a mix of both, I would say. You know, uh, there are some good quality content which is free. Use that. It doesn't cost you anything. I would say do both. Depends on again what purpose are you doing these courses for.
Hmm.
So if you're doing just for basic learning, then I would say Coursera or many of these other courses, edX. There's lots of good
Hmm.
stuff, content out there, but it's not very interactive. So you'll not be able to ask questions. You'll not be able to. It's not a tutorial. So because that takes more effort. But if you want to apply and you want to do, like if you're going for an interview or you're jumping into an assignment, you simply want to know basic level what is there, I think a free course will suffice. But if you want to do a certification and you actually want that to be used for a job or for a
Hmm.
project assignment, then I suggest you go from a reputed university because it will hold more credibility.
Okay, yeah. So, any questions from anyone else? I think we are done, Anu.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes, so we're pretty much on time. It's been a
Yeah.
pleasure to meet you, Shruti. Sorry if I've talked a lot, but I just get really excited when I come together with a group like this. I do hope that I was able to address some of the questions and look forward to some of you joining us also in Women in Technology. And it'll be a great collaboration with this. Also, I'd like to congratulate you and your team and Trigen for putting this together.
Thank you so much for your time, Anu. We enjoyed every bit of your talk, and it was very motivational. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And let's take
Yeah, in case if we get any other queries, we will just pass it on to you.
Yeah. I mean, you can pass it on to me, or people can just ping me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm pretty active there. I'd be happy to do that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Bye bye. So thank you all for your time. So in case if you have any queries, you can just leave us a message on the WWT Bangalore chapter Slack channel. So it would be great for us to carry forward it to Anu. So thank you all.